Welcome to the Grace Point Publishing Podcast. Join us on a journey with our authors as they explain the meanings behind their message, discuss what inspires them to write, and share the many parts of their book publishing journey. And now, here's your host, co-founder and publisher of Grace Point Publishing, Michelle Vandepass.
John, I've been super excited to interview you because we've been talking about your book for a long time, Synchronicity of Love, about your life that heal, transform, and awaken. That's the name of the book. I love it. Thank you for being a guest today.
Thank you, Michelle.
I am so inspired by your story for a number of reasons. Number one, it's not very often men write spiritual awakening stories. The thing that I found fascinating reading your book is all the little things that were synchronistic that you might not even call synchronistic, but the way you put them in the book is like you have all these synchronicities just lining up all the time in your life. Early in the book, there was something about finding somebody. You got a hit that you were going to find someone, but she'd be too good for you or something. It's been a while since I read that story. And you ran into her at the grocery store, but you didn't ask for her number. And you're like, oh, well, she must have been too good for me. All these stories about synchronicity. Talk to me about how we can pull more synchronicity into our own lives. We all want that. We want it to magically unfold.
That's a great question, Michelle. If I were to make it as simple as possible, it begins with tuning into what I would just call subtlety. And what I learned over time is intuition speaks to me in a quiet, subtle, quick voice. My mind is loud and tramples all over it. And when I started to listen to that quiet, still, quick, subtle voice, everything unfolded beautifully. Everything in my life began to change when I started to listen to that voice. I spent some time with psychics and readers and intuitives, and I found out, wow, I could do this too. And I didn't know it, but the intuition is so fast and so subtle. It happens in a second or two. And in the meantime, my louder mind, my personality tramples all over that. Learning to listen to that quiet, subtle voice within, that's what I would tell anybody that wants that sense of flow and synchronicity and one thing happening after another, just perfect order.
To me, the book does not feel like it was a quiet journey. So you say that, and I'm thinking, wow, it felt like a really intense journey, especially how you write it. I want to go back for a minute because I think this is important. I feel like I'm pretty good at listening to my intuition. I tune in a lot, and it took me years to get there. And I still find myself going, oh, yeah, I did get that clue yesterday, or I got that clue 15 minutes ago, or, oh, yeah, I did know that. And it's still so many times after the facts. How do we recognize that quiet, fast, intuitive hit when it's happening? How can we slow ourselves down enough to go, wait, I need to listen?
First of all, I empathize and sympathize with you. I can't tell how many times I knew it, but I trampled over it. And I looked back and went, crap, I did it again. So I totally understand where you're coming from. I think I'm learning right now, even having written and read my book, and I want to write another book, that what I'm going to call the brain and old habits are hard to break. The first inkling of hearing that voice and following that intuition, it just takes practice. It takes making it a habit, not listening to that other voice. I don't have a simple method. I would come across some new discovery, a new exploration, but it didn't mean I necessarily quickly integrated it into my life because old habits are hard to break. And so it's kind of an ongoing process of transformation, changing the old habits into new. For me, the word trust comes to mind. I start to trust that voice more and more, but I have to give myself the space to listen to that voice too.
I have had times where I've trusted the voice and it seemed like for no reason. And I have a specific example, and then I want to know if this happens to you. I went on vacation with my family over spring break recently. And I said, "Hey, do you think we should bring our passports?" And my husband's like, "No, no reason. We're inside the country. No reason to bring the passport." And I said to myself, "I'm going to throw the passports in my carry-on because I asked the question that might be my intuition speaking to me." We did not use them. That's kind of feels like intuition that wasn't correct.
That was a bold move.
So, is there such a thing as following intuition, or is it Murphy's Law? Because I took them, we didn't need them.
Geez, so this podcast is only going to be 20 minutes. I mean, we could go on for hours about that. One of the things I became aware of is a person's state of consciousness can be very changing. And what might look like I listened to my intuition and followed it, from that point of view, that's true. But I've also sometimes been able to step back from my life enough to see my life is just unfolding. On one hand, I listen to my intuition. On the other hand, I'm manifesting my desire. On the other hand, I put it in my suitcase and therefore they're not going to check me. All could be true depending on your point of view. And I don't have a concrete answer for you there. I do know there are people that listen to their intuition very well. There are people that claim that they have guides and angels that talk to them all the time, and they trust that implicitly. I'm kind of on the fence. I actually have had that experience. I don't have an answer for you. I think everybody's journey is unique, and what might be, look at me, I'm in charge of my life, I'm manifesting my life, is true to them, and somebody else, I'm following guidance, and that works for me.
I love that answer. That is an answer. So I want to go back to your book for a minute, because one of the things that's so interesting is it makes me want to go back and record all my dreams again, which I haven't done in 20 years. I used to write them all down. Are you still recording all your dreams?
I do. Yeah. Now I go through periods of time where I'm frankly busy and need the sleep, and I'm just like, not tonight, But boy, that just staying connected to those dreams. And in all honesty, probably 90% of the dreams are what I call just a dream, mental processing. But if you remember, one of the chapters in my book was I tried to identify what I call the spectrum of dreams. And there is a spectrum of dream, and there's some overlap. But after you record them enough, every now and then you get the dream, like, oh, I got to pay attention to this one. It kind of ebbs and flows, but I try to stay connected to that. And when I stay connected to that, I'm just happier. I don't know how else to put it. I feel like I'm more in sync.
You interpreted a dream. I think it was a monk outside your house that couldn't get in. And you interpreted that so differently than I might have interpreted that. When do we look at dream interpretation, and when do we go by our own intuition to look at our dreams?
That's another question I have no concrete answer for you, and drives you crazy if dreams aren't confusing enough. There are very personal meanings to dreams. There are tribal, cultural meanings. And by that, I mean the symbols within the dreams. There's a personal meaning. There's a tribal or cultural meaning, and there's a universal collective meaning. Trying to interpret dreams just by trying to interpret symbols doesn't always work either. So there has to be a little bit of an intuitive touch. I'll give you an example of how dreams can be personal. I used to love to fly fish. And one of the most difficult fish to catch in the world is a fish called a permit. And it's usually down in the Caribbean. It's a big dinner plate kind of shaped fish, flat but round. And the reason it's so difficult to catch is it swims in the shallow Caribbean where it's only 3 feet deep and it's as clear as a swimming pool. And the fish are incredibly sensitive to any vibration, any movement. And so I had a series of dreams about me catching permit, and I knew what the dream was trying to imply because my movement was into greater and greater subtlety, greater and greater sensitivity. But nobody else would have gotten that dream. Nobody else would have even known what kind of fish that was, but I knew what that was all about. And so fishermen that fish for permit stalk them like herons very slowly. What I would tell somebody that wants to start recording their dreams, just keep going. Even if you have no idea, you'll start to see patterns unfolding. And you might see the same dream in the same form maybe 100 times. And the 101st time, there's a shift. And all of a sudden that begins to shift in one's life. I think fate is less likely to guide our life. And so that's been my experience, is it's almost like getting an astrology reading every single night.
I have had dreams of which you also talk about where I felt like I'm just in a different dimension. I'm totally living, but in a different dimension, and they feel very real. And you talk about that as well. Are those more guiding dreams? Explain to me from your perspective the difference, because you talk about that a little.
I'm going to come back to dreams can be confusing as hell, but my life is immeasurably richer because of them. Sometimes, yeah, the dream is crystal clear. Here's the guidance. I love it. I'm so grateful for it and I follow it. Sometimes I don't know what the hell is going on, but I think it's cool. I've had some of those other dimensional kind of experiences where I wake up and like, what the heck was that? There's a popular spiritual teacher who was really popular in the 70s, 80s, and 90s named David Spangler. And he talked about having spiritual experiences 30 years ago that he said, in his words, he's still unpacking. And so sometimes those dreams that make no sense, they'll pop into consciousness 10 years later and it'll start to make sense. The only thing I can say for me is the more you record them and make it a habit, the easier it becomes to discern that this was my subconscious talking to me. This was just me mentally processing a difficult day. This is something I'm learning. This is something I'm being warned about. In the early days when I worked with dreams, I was part of a dream forum. And in all honesty, a lot of the people on there were telling me what my dreams meant because I had no idea. But eventually I was able to understand the language of my own dreams. I think that's how a lot of dream work begins, other people telling you what they think your dreams mean. But if you stick with it, it becomes easier to discern for yourself what the message is, if any.
You said something just a minute ago, and I don't exactly remember the words, but that you don't always have as many dreams of those out of body experiences or whatever words you used, but you've had lots of what I might call out of body experiences, healing experiences, Kundalini experiences, not in the dream state. That's fascinating to me that you were able to just allow all of that to happen. And you talk a lot about that in your book. Are you still having those experiences?
Not nearly as many. I can tell you, having spoken to some other people that have gone through that Kundalini energy experience, it's exciting. It's enthralling. It's terrifying. It's all of the above. And nobody's journey is ever the same. But if you were to grab a bunch of people who went through it, everybody would pretty much say the same thing. There was an intense energetic period. Could be for days, months, years, but it starts to cool over time. And because I think the journey is into greater and greater subtlety. And there could be a little bit of what feels like the hangover the next day after all the excitement when all that starts to fade. And so, no, I don't have nearly as many of those waking during the day kind of experiences I used to. And I admit there's a little bit of sadness about that. But I talked to enough people, and Adyashanti is a popular spiritual teacher. And he just said, yep, if I were to summarize, a lot of people go through a period with a lot of energy. He goes, I don't even want to call it Kundalini. There's a lot of energy and it starts to fade. And there's a process behind it. And the process is a slow ego dissolution. And so behind all the excitement is a deeper transformation that's afoot. And that can be a difficult stage to go through. That is there's many, but one of the definitions of the dark night is the sort of plunge into, oh my God, did I do something wrong? What happened to all these awesome experiences and these great dreams and this profound energy?
You mentioned going into a deeper state of subtlety. That is maybe how I've seen myself just becoming wiser, that I'm less quick to judge. The older I get, the less I know. I love that word that you use, subtlety. It's like this intuition of the passport. But these days, if I'm asking a question, I think that's my intuition speaking to me. And that's a very subtle change from where I was maybe a decade ago or 2 decades ago, where I wanted the hammer to come hit and tell me exactly what I was supposed to do and when I was supposed to do it. I've gotten more comfortable with subtlety, I guess. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with it totally. I went into it kicking and screaming a lot of times. I think I was a Yahoo, really excitement kind of guy, loved intensity. But today, I really appreciate subtlety. There's something about just being still and listening, and there's something really beautiful about it.
Now, you're a business person, right? By trade. You got that mind thing. You know all the systems and procedures and organization. Do you think that helped or hindered you in your spiritual journey?
The sense of what I would call masculine structure, being highly organized, very much a planner on the calendar, definitely got in the way of my spiritual journey. At the same time, after enough time has gone by, I realized the very thing that's comfortable for me, a lot of people are struggling to learn. And so I was struggling to learn its counterpart, which I hate the term, but people would call it feminine. Listening, being still, allowing, asking for help, being instead of doing, all the things that normally would be attributed to perhaps the right brain or feminine side has been my learning curve. But it's interesting. I see people that have that sort of feminine down, but they're struggling. They don't have that, what I would call masculine sense of structure. So I still lean on that. It's my comfort zone, but I feel far more whole and balanced and resourceful. And I'm so grateful that I've learned and embraced what feels like a whole other side to myself.
It is the yin yang or the sun moon energy. There's lots of models out there, masculine, feminine. To me, it feels like the generations that are coming up now may have more of that balance. Why is that? Have we done the hard work? Have you done the hard work?
Yeah, I think two things are going on. One is the cultural expectations of society about how a man is supposed to behave and how a woman is supposed to behave are coming undone. I think astrologers have known for years that astrology doesn't give a hoot about gender. There have been masculine women and feminine men throughout time. They just weren't allowed to demonstrate it. I think that's part of it, a huge part of it. I also, from some people I know that are very in touch with where Earth is going, that is where Earth is going, is not all matriarchy, not all patriarchy, but a healthy balance between the two. I think it's both. I think they're all working hand in hand. This is where the world is going. We might not see it really unfold for another 100 years or longer, but you can see it everywhere I look. You're right. Younger people are more inclined to try out both sides of themselves. And the demands that a man act a certain way or a woman act a certain way are not as prevalent as they used to be.
I see a big difference just in the last decade.
I agree.
Yeah. What does your daily life look like? Do you wake up and go into meditation and burn sage and drink your green juice? What are the things that you do every day?
Well, I've been in management my whole life. So my inclination is to leap out of bed and manage stuff and boss people around and tell them what to do. But I can't do that anymore. So the routine I try to stick to, and I'm pretty good about it, is I get up early in the morning. So I got up at 4:30 this morning and I did my morning pages, which I got from The Artist's Way, which one of my favorite books ever. It really helped me on my journey. And then I meditate. And then I answer my email and I go about my day. It's still very structured and organized. I literally have everything written out the night before. It's laying on my desk. But I also try to book time where I'm not doing anything. One of my favorite times to meditate is actually around 4 or 5 p.m. before dinner when the day is done, because that sense of me that wants to get things done is happy. And I feel so at peace meditating at the end of the day. I'm retired, but I'm an author now, and I'm working on 3 more books, and I'm learning all about book marketing, as you know, and wanted to thank you for a couple of the calls we had about book marketing. And I have 5 acres, and I maintain the whole yard myself. I get all my best ideas out of my John Deere mower, and my wife is a life coach, and we like to travel quite a bit, but not out of the country kind of travel, but we like road trips to Airbnbs and things like that. So that's my life right now.
Do you think you'd be a different manager now, knowing what you know?
Yeah, I am. And even when I sold my company, I was a different manager. And it's a difficult thing when you're running a company. There is this tendency to act one way at work and a different way at home. I found even I would be having dreams about some of my employees. And I told the story in my book that my right hand, her name was Julie, and she got everything done for me. And I had a dream about her daughter. And it was just an intuitive hit. It was like just a picture flash in my mind. She was with this big guy from Texas. And in an instant, I knew that they were going to get married. And so I was like, gosh, do I tell my employee this? So I kind of cautiously sneak up to her and said, I had this dream about your daughter. And she was with this big guy from Texas, and it looked like they were going to get married. Oh, no, she doesn't have a boyfriend. She's not, nothing about Texas. Well, guess what happens? About a month later, hey, John, look at this picture. There she is with this guy that's a foot taller than her. 3 years later, they got married. My tendency was to be honestly more intimate with my employees. My tendency was to throw an arm around them. Let's go for a walk and talk. And in all honesty, it might not be the best thing if you're running a large corporation to do it that way, but my management style became more intimate and personal over time.
Probably got better results, I would think. The book is The Synchronicity of Love, Stories That Heal, Transform, and Awaken. I think I'm going to go reread it because it's been a little while. Love the book. Thank you, John. We're going to put links to the book and show notes and everything. What's the last thing you'd like to leave our listeners with?
Michael Crichton's book, Travels, was the one that opened up all the doors for me. And there was a quote at the beginning of that book that I loved then and I love to this day. And it was from Rilke. And it goes, some evening, take a step out of your house, which you know so well. Enormous space is near. And that's been my experience. And I want to encourage people fearlessly to step out of their house and explore that enormous space. It's freaking awesome. A little scary sometimes, but it's freaking awesome.
Thank you, John. Love talking with you. We'll have you back.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Michelle. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Grace Point Publishing Authors Podcast. We can't wait to talk more next time as we introduce you to another one of our amazing authors. Make sure you hit subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss a single episode of the Grace Point Publishing Authors Podcast. To find out more about our authors and to see how we can help you publish your book, head to gracepointpublishing.com. Keep writing, keep creating. Your words matter.